Well, happy Thursday. Happy Thursday. It is Whitnie Wiley and Robert Hilliard. We are here for the State of Leadership, Simple and Beyond. And today we're going to be talking about self-worth and confidence and how you can confidently protect your self-worth, your values, the things that are important to you, not letting people run roughshod all over you. You know, Robert, this is an issue that I have a lot with my clients. You know, I think we talked a few weeks ago about boundaries, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And this is part of that, and understanding who you are, what's important to you, what value you place on you, and the things that are important to you, so that you can actually put some boundaries around it, right? And you can push back when necessary, when people are testing your boundaries. And the challenge is not so much sometimes that people don't have boundaries, it's that protecting piece, right? Feeling like that it's okay to protect your boundaries because I might lose my job or lose out on an opportunity or something like that. So today we're going to have a conversation about that. We invite you to join us. If you have something you'd like to say, feel free, put it in the comments. Robert, what say you?
I say a lot, actually, so I'm going to try to be brief. I think one of the things that came up for me when you started introducing this topic is that, knowing your boundaries, right? Well, putting boundaries on some of those relationships. And I think that a lot of times people don't know what their boundaries are. And so you need to be self-aware, right? So be self-aware. Also, you need to know what your values are. I think it starts with that. Know what your values are, because when your boundaries are being infringed upon, it's usually 9 times out of 10, or even, I dare say 10 out of 10. It's because your values are being threatened, or you feel that your values are being threatened. So know what your values are. I think we started talking about this because somebody was sharing in a post about leaving relationships, more professional relationships. And I think that when you choose a job or a career that's aligned with your personal values, and when it becomes misaligned, that's when you should start thinking about, walking away. And if you've done that work and you know what your values are, you should feel confident that walking away is the right choice, because it's not going to get any better. Now, you don't walk away the very first time your values have been infringed upon. You want to give it some time, because maybe that's just a fluke. You want to monitor that. And over time, if it's just not a fit for your values, then you can confidently move on and know that you've made the right decision.
No, I think you're right. And so I'll put the link to the post. It was from Leadership First. It was a post about, and it had a quote that said, "Give yourself enough respect to walk away from someone who doesn't see your worth." And the reason that I thought that was important was because I've run into that a number of times in my life, in professional environments and in, personal relationships. And when someone else is not valuing you, even if you start off with a place of self-worth, high value, it can start to erode. And as that erodes, if you let it continue, then you end up in a place that is not a good one for continuing to do the things that you want to do. We have enough challenges already in life that we don't need the added one of having people help us, feel bad about ourselves. Our brains do that. It does that all on its own. And we're already working to counterbalance that. And then to have other people taking actions, doing things, saying things that do that, it doesn't serve us. And so I think, and we've talked about this as well, a lot of what is going on right now in the workplace and work cultures is the feeling that people are not being valued, right? And it finally feeling like you can stand up and say, you know what, I deserve better than this. I deserve more respect. I deserve more money or more whatever it is that you feel that you deserve more of. But you can't get there until you know what it is. And so, Robert is absolutely right. It starts with some self-awareness, and it starts with understanding what your values are for yourself, for your life, and the other things around you.
Yeah, and to add to that, it's also about knowing how you want to show up, right? How do you want to present yourself? And when you're in an environment where you are not showing up authentically, or it's taking you out of your character, or you're not an angry person, but you find that you're angry all the time, it's probably, that's a sign that something's wrong. I had a supervisor years ago that said, and I may have said it on the show, that if Sunday evening is the worst night of
Mhm.
your week, it's time for you to reevaluate. It's time for you to reevaluate your work situation. And I agree with that. So it's about that. And know why you're staying. If you decide to stay, the flip side of that is know why you're staying.
Yes.
Maybe it's not an alignment personally for you, for your personal values, but you have a mission. And maybe your mission is to work with difficult environments, so you build up that resilience. Maybe that's your mission. Maybe it's to help those organizations to change and to grow. Know what your personal mission is. And so if you have a mission that you can complete by staying, by all means do that.
Yeah.
But when it gets to be too much, you don't want to wait. Know what your triggers are. You don't want to wait until you're in a situation where you feel like you're going to blow up. And that's just going to make you look bad. It's going to reflect poorly on you. So you want to know how you're going to show up, how you want to show up. I think that's really important. And know that when something is taking you out of your character. For me personally, when I find that I'm withholding, if it is something I want to say to somebody and I'm withholding it from them, I know I need to start forcing myself to have those conversations, because
Mm.
those things become a pressure cooker for me. And it's like, it's like Jenga. That last piece goes on, and the whole tower falls. So you want to, for me, I know myself. So when I find that I'm withholding 2 or 3 of my, holding back from saying things to that person, I know it's time for me to, force myself to speak up, or it's going to be a bad situation.
Right.
So, know yourself. If you have a mission, if you're staying, it's really good to define what that mission is, know your values. And then when things are not in alignment, you can feel confident that it's time to go. And I think, I don't want to give away too much, but I think that we were talking about, to confidently protect your worth. And I know that a lot of people struggle with so I'm going to ask you to share some of your wisdom about that.
So I'm love to. I love talking about confidence. I want to just say that to start with, sort of to put some parameters around this. When we're talking about self-worth, or at least when I'm talking about self-worth, and Robert can chime in if he sees it a little differently, is that this is about the level of importance that you place on yourself, right? So when I think about my self-worth, what do I think about and feel about myself? How important do I think I am, and why do I think that? I think I am worthy, right? Because I am. That's my mindset and where I come from. And it's not dependent on my title. It's not depending on my income, my net worth, right? It's not dependent on my achievements. I am worthy because I am. And so it controls your self-worth, controls the way you see yourself and a lot of how you navigate the world. So it's not about a bravado or being a bully or a sociopath, a psychopath, or any of those paths. It's just about how you see yourself and whether you value yourself as a person, just because, and not because of the things that you have or the things that you've done. So I just want to put that out there, that when I'm talking about self-worth, that's where I'm coming from.
I agree, Whitney, and I think that not to get too, off the beaten path here, but I think too many times we place value on things, titles, money, material objects. Those things are great. I'm not saying that they aren't, but
as we have diplomas and books in our
exactly, those things are great, but that is not my worth.
Right.
That I got that because other people value those.
Which is such a good point. That is such a good point. And a lot of what we do is about other people and trying to convince them that we're worthy so that they will give us what we want, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things, I consider that it's the entryway, right? Then you can get to know me for who I really am.
Yes.
That opens the door. That's not who I am. That's just something that I happened to have achieved. It's not, my worth is not caught up in it. And believe me, I have done many things. I have failed in far more things than I have achieved. But it all becomes who you are. That's how you learn. And so we are all worthy. We're all worthy. And these other things are just, as my good friend Monica Coleman would say, that's just how people play the game.
Exactly.
These are things that allow us to play the game. And that's that's just what it is.
It's interesting because I had an experience, it would be almost 2 years ago now, and I was talking with the host of a podcast, and we were deciding whether or not I was a good fit for her show and whether or not I would be a guest. And so she said, "Tell me about yourself." And immediately I started rattling off my credentials. And she listened to me, and then she said, that's fine. Thank you for sharing the things that you've done, your credentials, your qualifications, but now tell me about you. Right? And it was like in that moment that I had this epiphany that exactly what you just said. Those things are not me. Those are things that I've done. They are things that I've accomplished. I'm proud of them. The people that I know and love, and who know and love me, are proud of me for doing those things, but they know and love me regardless.
Yeah.
Right. And that becomes the essence of this. When you can get to a point where you know and love yourself without the trappings of the stuff that's around you, the stuff that you own or that the bank owns. Was with a client yesterday, and I was trying to make a point to her. I asked her if she and her husband own their house, and she said, "No, the bank owns it." It's like, yes, of course.
True.
I was like, but yeah, right, you know what I mean. But regardless of who technically owns the stuff around you, or the house that you live in, or the car that you drive, or whatever, despite all of those things, who are you at your core? And are you okay with that person? Can you accept who you are? Because that becomes the way you go about measuring. And I think that has a lot to do with, like you said, how we play the game, the stuff that we have that other people see because it matters to them, is probably a reflection of, to some degree, their self-worth. And I have this stuff, it becomes part of my self-worth. Therefore, in order for me to value other people, they need to have it too. Right. And so and I'm going down this path because you need to unravel it a little bit so that you can get to the point where when you are okay with yourself, it becomes possible to actually confidently stand up for yourself, to push back a little bit when someone is denying you what you believe that you're worth. And I'm not talking about just in your career and money, right? Or promotions. Those things are important and are a part of it. But when people don't respect you, period, when you're here's a really simple example. When I'm walking down the street and, people are, you've had this experience, I'm sure. There's a group of people coming towards you. They're lined up, taking up the entire sidewalk. And as they continue moving towards you, there's a decision to be made about whether you step aside and let all four of them, come, or you can sort of hold your ground. So there are a couple of ways to look at it. You can just say, I'm being considerate and I'm moving out of the way, or I deserve to walk down the sidewalk just as much as the four of you. And there should be some consideration of two of you falling back, right, to make space so we can pass each other respectfully. And so when I'm walking down the street or up and down the street or driving or whatever, right, there are considerate things to do. And then there are things that you do that is beyond consideration. And it's because you don't feel like you have the right or feel like you belong. And that's the piece that I'm talking about. When you can start to feel confident in yourself, then when people are pushing against you, you don't have to say it out loud, right? It's not about you saying it out loud. It's just about you standing confidently in your own 2 feet, knowing that you are worthy of where you are, the position that you have, and the space that you're occupying.
Yeah, I think using your analogy, I think that's a really good analogy because, there are a bunch of people, 4 people coming down the street, and you're by yourself. You have to assess the situation, right? So you know my background, so I'm like, are they dangerous?
See, that's not something that occurs to me. I don't know why.
Are they dangerous? If I hold my ground, is it gonna cause a problem? So you start to assess, and when you think about sticking up for yourself, is it better to cross the street? Is it better to move to the side? You want to look at all the options before you decide which one. And I think that it may be appropriate, to stand your ground. It may be appropriate to move to the side. It may be appropriate to cross, to the other side. So, you have to consider all possibilities before you decide on an action. I think we get into trouble when, and I love that analogy because, I've been in that situation. You see, it's like, I'm going to hold my ground regardless. Well, that may not be the best thing to do,
It
right?
may not.
It may not be the best thing. So you need to, take it all in and decide what is the appropriate thing, which is why I said know yourself, right? And know yourself, know how you may react in those situations, and react, or I should say respond appropriately. We're talking about playing the game, right? So when you're sticking up for yourself, if you choose to do so, you want to do it in a way that's seen as being appropriate, right? because
That part is true. That
because
part is very true.
we're playing the game. So you don't want to be blowing your stack, and then that reputation follows you, and then people do a background check and they're like, that person has anger issues, when you don't have anger issues, but you just held it inside and you blew up. So you want to know yourself, know what your threshold is, know when you need to say something. And if you've done your work, and this is all about doing work on yourself, you know that you can make a decision and feel confident in the decision that you make. So yeah, so all of those things are, I think, what you said is appropriate, but you need to, assess the situation and make sure you're making the right choice for yourself.
No, no, I agree with you. And there may be times when you make an assessment and that's not the case. I'm not particularly talking about dangerous situations.
I know you're not.
You're walking through the hood. That
But,
kind of thing. But
it may be dangerous to speak your mind, right? When you have a tremendously influential person, who can,
absolutely.
totally capsize your career. So that's why I thought that was a great, analogy that you made. It's like, yeah, it's crossing that street. Is it, can I stick up for myself? Or yeah, I want to stick up for myself.
Or no, it becomes more about, I think what you're saying is it becomes more about the way you go about doing it. This is not about creating confrontation.
Not at all.
I'm not talking about creating confrontation. I'm, standing your ground, standing up for yourself, recognizing your self-worth, and helping others. It may not be in the moment, right? You may have to have that conversation somewhere else, another place, another time, in private. It's not about confrontation, and it's not about being a bully in response to a bully. Right? I'm not talking about that. Right. So I thank you for making that distinction, because that's not what I was suggesting at all.
Oh, I know you weren't suggesting that.
Well, I know you weren't, but I didn't want, when you mentioned that, I didn't want it to come across that that's what I was suggesting. There absolutely is a time and a place for every conversation. So we have a question that says, how do we accept the parts of us we are not comfortable with?
Oh, wow.
And thank you for that, Vijita. She's in India, or had been at some point. So I have done some work with her. Thank you for being here. And she's an attorney. And so, when I think about the parts of in your question in general, but when I think about this in terms of myself and the work I'm doing with my clients, I'd be interested in knowing your experience with this, Robert, with your clients. It starts with that piece of, well, why are you not comfortable with this piece of you? What's the origin of that? Does it have something to do with your childhood? And often it goes back. Someone said something once, right? You're a kid and someone says something once or twice or multiple times. We don't come to this planet thinking bad things about ourselves, right? That is a behavior that, or the words that are that we ultimately use, are things that we learn. right? So, yes, there's the negativity bias and the propensity for our brains to sort of go down these paths of negativity. But where does that come from? And when you start, if you'll do the work, as Robert said, and start to look at where did that come from, right? Where was the first time you heard something that impacted how you feel about yourself, or where you are not accepting something about yourself? Probably has to do with something that your parents said, maybe your siblings, kids on the school ground, a teacher, or, something. I had a conversation with a client a couple of weeks ago. Um, she's a creative, artistic, and she's has a problem with sort of putting her art out. And I asked where that came from. And it was in the 5th grade or somewhere around there. She was trying to get into an advanced art class, and the teacher said she wasn't good enough. And she'd been holding on to that all this time. Right. So these things are in areas of ourselves where we feel like we're not good enough, and then we become fearful of putting it out there, being vulnerable with it. We have to stop and look at where that started, and then challenge the veracity of that statement. So what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are very similarly aligned with yours. I think you have to do inner work, know where that's coming from, whether it's your inner critic talking to you, and realize that when
some outer critic, right?
or an outer critic talking to you.
Yeah.
Right? So if it's your inner critic, you have to realize what you're talking about is your creation of your inner critic. Your inner critic was created to protect you. So it keeps you from, doing certain things, right? So
Yes.
if you were told that your art wasn't good, it's going to say you're not good enough. Don't put yourself.
Don't put your art out there because It's not good enough. Yes,
you're going to be embarrassed. It's there to protect you, right? But realize that no growth will come to you if you play small. That's one thing. And the other thing is to how do you accept the parts of yourself that you don't that you're struggling with compassion. I think it's really interesting that a lot of people will find it easier to give compassion to other people, but they're not very compassionate with themselves. And one of the questions that I would ask that person is, if your friend came to you with the same thing you're struggling with, what would you tell them? It's probably going to be something positive. Then not tell yourself that. And if you can't tell yourself that, that's what you really need to look at. Why you're struggling with, taking your own advice, right? So if you would tell your friend, hey, you're good enough to do that. Your art is great, right? Or whatever. Why can't you tell yourself? And that becomes the basis of the work there. So it starts with some compassion for yourself.
But here's the other thing. We can get 99 people saying that something we've done or are doing is great, is spectacular, it's fabulous. And then you get that one person, right?
I know where you're going.
And then we start harping on like the one person as if that person is the know-all, is the end-all be-all, right? So here's the thing that I have done that has helped me. Maybe it will help you as well. Is really to challenge the truth of the matter. Is to ask the questions, whether or not it is in fact true, whatever it is I'm thinking. And one of the things I've started doing is, instead of letting my inner critic that is of my own making or is repeating stuff of outer critics, is to respond to that inner critic with the truth out loud. And it's an exercise that I have my clients do, because if you just arguing, in your head, you can allow that inner critic's voice to drown out the truth, right? So this is sort of a play on something that I learned at Tony Robbins like 4 years ago. And you can do it in a number of different ways. You can, if you do it in your head, give that inner critic a funny voice,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or some voice that you just can't take seriously. And then start repeating the truth. In order to repeat the truth, though, you've got to do the work to get to what the truth is. You've got to figure out, where does this come from, and then analyze whether or not it's actually true. And you can get a lot of that, as Robert said, by asking other people. People will tell you the truth of who you are and whether or not you really are good enough. So a teacher says to someone in the 5th grade that you're not good enough. You continue to do art. You hold it close to yourself because you enjoy it, but you don't let anyone see it. Someone sees it, they tell you that it's good, and you don't believe them because you're still holding on to this piece from, however long ago it was.
And I want to add to that, Whitnie, or, you can use that as information, because you don't want to think that just because they're not telling you what you want to hear, they're wrong. They may be right. And I say this because one of the most painful but best experiences of my music career, because I used to be a professional musician before all this, was that when I was much younger, I got completely blown off the stage. And that became the fuel that made me look at all the things I couldn't do. So, and in doing that, I started practicing certain things that I had been avoiding, and I got better. So you want to be able to look at it from a truthful standpoint.
The truth, right?
The truth, like you're saying, the truth. And if it's true, then use it as, all data is good data, right? If it's true,
Yes.
Okay, I know I need to work on this. Does it mean that you cannot achieve, your art it doesn't mean your art isn't good. It may mean that you need to work on some things.
Right.
I think one of the things that we could possibly do a show on late bloomers, right? There have been tons of late bloomers, people that struggled with things. They had ideas that they just couldn't put together until later on, but they were still valuable and important. And I think
Yes.
that's really, we sometimes miss that we have to do what everybody else is doing in the same time frame that they're doing it, and we're all different. We're all unique. So, look.
No, that's a good point, and it's interesting. I have another client who is older. She's also a lawyer, looking to make a change. A different client than the other client. She wants to move into the art world. So she's a lawyer, wants to move into the art world. And it was feeling some of that about being older. And so the exercise I sent her off to do was to find some biographies of people who became successes later in life.
Late
right?
blooming.
Lots of people who did not achieve success at 19 or 20. Most people don't, right? So this fallacy that we have that young people are the ones that are doing things it's not true. Yes, it happens, but it happens just as much for people who are on the more mature side of life.
Let me tell you a secret about the entertainment industry. Most people aren't the age that they say they are. And a lot of times the media loves overnight sensations. Most of those people that are overnight sensations have been doing it for 10 or 15 years, and they just got noticed. So there are very few people are overnight sensations. It does happen. It's very rare. Yeah.
That's very true. So before we move to the confidence part, I just want to finish this piece up about the truth. And I had a thought earlier, and it's about objectivity and subjectivity. Right. And when you're looking at the truth of the matter, that you have to bring both pieces of both of those into play. Right. Objectivity, people who are objective and people who are subjective, and maybe even exploring motives of people when they are telling you things as you are going through the process of looking at the truth. And as Robert said, it's just data. It's feedback. Take it for what it's worth, use it to improve if that's what's necessary, And if it's not, then you can let it go.
Mhm.
Right? You can let it go. So I just wanted to say that before we moved into confidence. So here's the thing about confidence. People tend to think that you have to be confident in order to do the thing, whatever the thing is. And I posit that you do the thing to build the confidence. And so, the more, in the case of what we're talking about today, the more you recognize your worth, the more you stand up for yourself in the way that's appropriate for the situations that you find yourself in, right? The more you do that, the more you'll be confident to do that. And so, if you're thinking that before I can stand up for myself, I've got to feel confident, that's probably not going to happen. Right? And confidence is one of those things that's situational. It's situational. So you can be confident in one area of your life and not confident in another area. But you can use the fact that you're confident in other areas, that you have successes, you can use that to help build yourself up and to remind yourself that you can do things, that you've done things, that you've done hard things, that you have succeeded at things, right? And you use that and bring it to the situation that you find yourself in. So instead of thinking that you're supposed to have this even level of confidence across all areas of your life, recognize that that's not how it works. And when you start there with the understanding that it takes work, it takes action on your part. There's something about knowing, I think the way you put it is how to play the game, right? There's something about knowing the rules to the game, to know how to play the game, that makes it possible for you to do the things that you need to do. And ultimately, if you want to feel confident to stand up for yourself, if you want to feel confident to take actions, the bottom line is to start to take actions in spite of how you feel. You got to take, and sometimes they're baby steps, right? They're not always big leaps. They're baby steps, and you may have to take lots of them. But when you start to accept it, that it's the process, then it makes it easier for you to take one step after another.
I totally agree, and I'm big on small steps. In fact, I was writing that as you were talking. Small steps. If you don't know how to swim, you don't have confidence, right? You're afraid of the water. You're not going to go to an Olympic-sized pool and jump. You're going to start small. You start small.
Unless your father throws you into the pool and says,
that's different. That's different. But you start small. You start step by step by step until you can gain that confidence. You can do that. And here's the thing. Remember, confidence is internal. It's not based on the outer things, because at some point, and we see it all the time with musicians, we see it with athletes, you can have a skill and hone that skill, and you can lose your confidence. And once you lose your confidence, the skill will evaporate. So you have to do the mental work and build the resilience that will allow you to regain that when your confidence falters. You may, and you were talking before about, I know we're getting ready to wrap things up, but you were talking before about people saying all these great things about us, and then one person says one negative thing. And negative energy is much heavier than positive energy, and it's just how we're wired. We just once someone says one negative thing, but you need to be able to withstand that. I don't know anybody that likes negative feedback or negative comments, but you have to build the resilience, because it's going to happen. And that's, it's just one of those, it's one of the muscles that you have to work on building as well. I'm working on that muscle.
No, that's absolutely true. And so that reminds me of a couple of things. Is one, it's about progress, not perfection. And a way that you can move yourself towards just being more confident in different areas of your life is to remember it is about progress. It's not about perfection. And you get to define success, right? You define success. If you define success based on what other people will do or how other people feel or respond, rather than success is how it is based solely on what you can control, then you're going to have problems building your confidence. You're going to have problems taking action, even baby steps, because it's dependent on the external. So one of the things that you can do is to reframe what success is, what it means to you, in the light of what it is you're trying to accomplish. All right, so we've talked about a number of different things. So the self-worth, the confidence, and give yourself grace as part of that process of it's progress, not perfection, is to give yourself some grace and not be so hard on yourself that you end up moving yourself in the opposite direction or giving up. The client I was talking about, who's a lawyer, is looking to move into the art world. One of the things that she is doing, this is a homework assignment for her, growth work assignment for her, is to reach out to some art galleries, owners of art galleries. That, you know, that's her long-term vision, is to own an art gallery. So reach out and start having conversations about what they did to start the gallery. You don't start at the top. We always want to start at the end result. And most of us are not in a position to do that financially, energized time, any of that. So going back to baby steps. So what did some people do to get started? Right? Everyone didn't start with $1 million art gallery. They may have started with 2 pieces of art in, you know, a room or at home, or who knows, right? Do some research, find out. So she's doing that. And so I said, you know, just call 5. So let's start with 5. Call 5 and let's start getting some information, feedback, some data, right? Where's the first place her mind went? They won't answer her questions. They won't talk to her, right? And it's like, that's not how we're defining success. Success in this instance, and we're only talking about this instance,
is the action.
Is the action of actually making the call. So if you make the calls, you've succeeded. Another client was struggling, looking for a new job, struggling to, you know, put a resume out there. It doesn't matter whether you get an interview or not. If right now you've got a block that's keeping you from sending out your resume because you're fearful of whatever it is, and I'm not going to get into that here, the action to take to get past that is just to send them out. Mm-hmm. Right? So there's always something that you can do that moves you in the direction of where you're trying to go. And no matter how small you think it is, whether it's not getting you where you want to go, know that every step you take is a step in the right direction. Ready, fire, aim. Ready, fire, aim. Just do it, and then get the data from that, the feedback from the action you've taken that will inform the next action you take. Yeah. And the more you do that, the more confident you become. And then the more confident you become, the less you'll have obstacles and things that will actually stand in your way.
And I actually have people actually journal, like not journal, I hate to use that word because people are like, oh, I hate journaling. Write down that accomplishment, write down the barrier
Absolutely.
that you broke through, because that becomes your evidence that it's possible.
Exactly. Exactly. That is such a good point. I do the same thing. I start every session with my clients. We start with wins, and it's like you keep track of these things because they become, speaking of objective, the objective proof
Mhm.
of the things that you. So it's not me blowing smoke that you're great. It's not you trying to convince yourself that you're great, right? You have the objective proof that says that you are. So with that, great conversation. Thank you. We want to thank you for joining us. We are here for the State of Leadership every Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific. If there's a topic that you'd like for us to cover, please drop us a note. You can send a DM here in LinkedIn, or you can do it on Facebook, or we're also being seen live on YouTube. You can leave a message there. Let us know if you'd like us to cover something in particular. We thank you for your continued support. If there's anything that either Robert or I can do, Robert is an executive coach. I am a career management transition coach and strategist. If there's anything that we can do to help you, please reach out, as well as organizational development issues. Reach out. We'd be happy to have a conversation with you to see how we might be of service. So with that, thank you for joining us. And until next time, take care.
Take care.